and famed gator hunter Troy Landry of the show Swamp People has found himself in a little bit of hot water.
Louisiana wildlife and fishery agents cited him after an undercover sting in St. Mary.
Swamp People didn't fall apart all at once. First, beloved cast members disappeared. Then tragedy struck. Arrests made headlines, and a mass firing left longtime viewers furious. Even Troy Landry, the face of the series, faced serious health and legal troubles. But the biggest threat may have nothing to do with the people on screen. The swamp itself is changing, and the consequences could be bigger than the show itself. So what is really happening behind the scenes, and how did one of history's biggest reality shows become almost unrecognizable? Join us as we uncover the story behind the transformation of Swamp People.
It's not worth it to me. Like, this land could just get sucked out from underneath us any second.
How a phone call created one of history's biggest shows. It all started with one simple phone call. The History Channel had reached out to Matthew Ostrom, then a vice president at production company Original Media, with a surprisingly vague idea. There was something interesting happening in the swamps of Louisiana, and they wanted him to find out what it was. Intrigued by the idea, Matthew and a small team went into the Atchafalaya Basin, the largest swamp and river basin in the United States, covering more than 1 million acres of south-central Louisiana, and spent weeks looking at everything anyone in that world did for a living. The production team was not looking for a lifestyle show or a cultural documentary. They were looking for stakes, the combination of skill, tradition, danger, and personality that makes reality television compelling enough for a viewer to return every week for season after season. And they found exactly what they were looking for. The team discovered Junior Edwards, a veteran alligator hunter from Pierre Part, Louisiana. He was the first significant character the production team encountered in the swamp, and his energy, his obvious mastery of a world that looked completely alien to anyone watching from outside it, told the team they had found their show. The pilot was filmed with Junior and the community around him, and the Atchafalaya Basin became the stage. Swamp People premiered on History on August 22, 2010, and the debut season drew numbers that nobody at the network had projected. The show was raw, physically demanding television, about people doing something most of its audience had never imagined doing. Hunting American alligators during Louisiana's 30-day season, filling as many tags as possible before time ran out, earning most of their annual income in a single month of brutal work in one of the most unforgiving environments in North America. It was compelling for the same reason anything genuinely dangerous is compelling on screen. The risk was real, and the world they lived in was a world that looked completely unlike anywhere else in America. Troy Landry emerged quickly as the show's center of gravity. The king of the swamp from Pierre Part, a man who had grown up in alligator country and who consistently filled more tags than anyone else in the basin, became the face of Swamp People. Not long after, his sons Jacob and Chase joined him. His catchphrase, "Shoot 'em," entered the vocabulary of viewers who had never been within 1,000 miles of a Louisiana bayou. History had its hit, the ratings climbed, and the expansion of the cast began. What nobody could see yet was that the expansion of the cast was also the beginning of the instability that would come to define the show's middle era. The night the swamp took one of its own. For 2 seasons, Mitchell Geist and his brother Glenn were among the most beloved characters on Swamp People. They lived off the land in a way that made even the other hunters look conventional by comparison. They hunted, they fished, they ate what they caught. They had an uncomplicated, almost medieval relationship with the swamp that required no translation for any audience. 2 brothers who had built their entire world inside a wetland and who needed nothing from outside it to be completely content. On May 14, 2012, Mitchell Gist went out on the Bell River in the morning. the same way he had gone out on the river hundreds of times before. He was cruising along the Bell River when he reportedly fell out of his boat after having suffered what appeared to be a seizure. Attempts at reviving him through CPR were unsuccessful. He was 47 years old, 4 days before his 48th birthday. The autopsy confirmed natural causes. His heart had stopped somewhere on the water that had been his home his entire life. History Channel released a statement that said, "In full, we are extremely saddened to report that our friend and beloved member of the Swamp People family, Mitchell Gust, has passed away earlier today. Mitchell passed on the swamp, doing what he loved." The executive producer of Swamp People, Brian Catalina, said with his passing, they had lost a really important part of our family. Glenn Gist continued appearing on the show for several more seasons, last seen in season 11 in 2020. He eventually returned to the Bayou life full-time, reportedly constructing a houseboat near Pierre Par on the Bell River, the same water where his brother died. He chose the swamp over television. That choice, made quietly and without drama, was its own kind of tribute. 6 years after Mitchell's death, the show lost another one of its own. Randy Edwards, the youngest son of Junior Edwards and a fan favorite from the first season, died on September 15, 2018, in a car accident in Louisiana. He lost control of his vehicle on Highway 75 and was killed. He was 35 years old. The show went on after both deaths. It always does. But neither man was replaced or forgotten. They were simply no longer there, and the absence was felt. What happened next would change Swamp People in a completely different way. Not through tragedy, but through a behind-the-scenes shakeup that would send some of the show's most familiar faces packing. So why did so many cast members suddenly disappear in 2015? The mass firing that nobody saw coming. If the deaths of Mitchell Gist and Randy Edwards changed Swamp People in an irreversible emotional way, the events of 2015 changed it in an operational way that was equally permanent and far more contentious. When original media took over the show's production following a corporate transition, it moved quickly to reshape the cast, and the reshaped cast bore almost no resemblance to the one that audiences had spent 5 years investing in. 8 cast members were removed from Swamp People after season 6 in 2015. The cuts were delivered via a terse email that gave no warning and no explanation. Junior Edwards, who had been the first significant character the production team had found during their initial exploration of the basin, the man who had essentially provided the blueprint for what the show became, was out. Gator Queen Liz Cavalier, one of the show's most popular figures and one of the very few women in a world that was almost entirely male, was out. The Edwards and Cavalier families together represented a substantial portion of the show's institutional memory and audience loyalty. Liz went public on Facebook shortly after being fired, writing, "Due to unknown reasons by the production company, Original Media, my family and myself, along with other original cast members, besides Jeremy and David, will no longer be participating in the Swamp People series." She added that it saddened her to know that fans would be the ones to suffer from these unexplained actions. The post spread quickly, and the production reportedly asked her to take it down. She did not immediately comply, and the friction that followed effectively ended any possibility of a smooth reconciliation between the fired cast and the show. Junior Edwards also took to Facebook to address rumors circulating in the wake of the firings. "I see a bunch of posts saying that a certain family was saying that we asked for more money, and that's why we are not on the show anymore," he wrote, firmly denying that financial demands had anything to do with the decision. The fan response was exactly what anyone who had watched the show faithfully would have predicted. The comment sections were filled with people saying they would not be watching Season 7 without the cast they had come to love. Regardless of the responses, the History Channel replaced the fired members with new hunters, people who were competent and willing, but who had zero prior relationship with an audience that was already in a state of genuine grievance. Liz Cavalier eventually returned briefly in 2021 for Season 12, making a limited appearance before fading from the show again. Junior Edwards returned briefly for that same season, before his cancer diagnosis and ultimate death in July 2025 at 79. But neither return felt like a restoration. The mass firing of Season 6 had fractured something in the show's relationship with the audience that newer, better-produced seasons could not fully repair. But the cast changes of Season 6 were only the beginning. The show had already proven that people could disappear because of production decisions. But what happened when the reason was far more serious and the police became involved? The assault arrest and the domestic violence charge. The mass firing of Season 6 was the biggest single disruption to Swamp People's cast. But it was not the only time the show lost people to circumstances entirely outside the control of any production company. The raw, unpolished world that Swamp People was documenting, the world that made the show feel authentic, also produced the kinds of off-camera incidents that television networks find impossible to accommodate. R.J. Molinaire and his son, J. Paul, were among the most charismatic additions to the Swamp People cast in the show's early expansion years. Native Americans of the Huma Nation, they hunted alligators using physical techniques that traced back to traditions predating any commercial hunting industry, including, in some instances, wrestling the animals in the water. They were different from the Cajun hunters who made up the rest of the cast in ways that the show used effectively, and their father-son dynamic gave the audience another family unit to follow alongside the Landrys and the Edwardses. In 2013, R.J. and J. Paul Molinaire were arrested on assault and battery charges after allegedly assaulting a man with a beer bottle at a gas station. They pleaded not guilty to the charges, claiming they had in fact been the victims of aggravated assault and that their alleged victim was attempting to capitalize on their television profile for personal gain. The legal outcome was never fully publicly resolved. No conviction was confirmed in any available reporting. But the arrest itself had consequences that did not require a conviction to materialize. They disappeared from the show and did not return for multiple seasons. Trapper Joe LaFont Jr., another Swamp People cast member, was arrested in July 2012 on a domestic battery charge after an incident at the Buena Vista Hotel and Spa in Orange County, Florida, in which he allegedly burned his girlfriend with a lit cigarette and punched her in the chest in full view of other guests. He had a prior assault plea on his record as well. His trajectory on the show reflected what networks do with this kind of situation when they are trying to preserve a brand. A quiet distancing that avoids any official statement while making the practical outcome clear. The show survived all of it and kept going, kept finding new hunters, returning to the basin every September. But each incident left a mark on the show's identity that accumulated across the seasons. Through every scandal, departure, and setback, one figure remained at the center of Swamp People. And when that man was suddenly forced to confront a serious health scare of his own, fans had to wonder, could the show survive if Troy Landry was no longer at the helm? The man the show cannot survive without. Troy Landry is the load-bearing wall of Swamp People. Remove him and the structure of what the show has become collapses. He is genuinely who he appears to be. He is a man who was born in the Atchafalaya Basin, who has hunted alligators his entire life, whose sons grew up doing the same thing, and whose family's roots in Pierre Part run 300 years deep into Cajun history, which is why what happened to Troy Landry In the years after the show's peak audience became genuinely important to the show's ability to continue at all. In June 2022, Troy underwent surgery after being diagnosed with prostate cancer. He was open about the process with his fans. However, he did not provide detailed updates on his health, and the show did not make his cancer a dramatic storyline. He simply dealt with it the way he deals with everything, by continuing to show up. In 2024, Troy faced legal consequences of a different kind. He was cited by the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries for failing to tag an alligator upon taking, after authorities received a tip about someone setting alligator lines in an area where they were not permitted to be hunting. The two citations given were for an improperly tagged alligator and cutting a dead alligator from the line. Authorities seized Landry's boat and engine. The maximum punishment for these citations was up to 120 days in jail and a $950 fine. Troy said he had been gifted 2 tags, but that authorities confirmed none of the tag numbers matched any assigned for the area he was hunting in. He did not comment extensively on the incident beyond a reference to a speeding ticket in September 2024, and his continued active social media presence in the period following suggested that the legal consequences were not severe enough to interrupt his life in any meaningful way. In July 2025, Troy mourned the deaths of 2 important people in his life within close succession. Junior Edwards, the veteran hunter who had been present at the very creation of the show, the first significant character the production team had encountered in the basin, died on July 26, 2025, at 79 after a battle with colon cancer. A man Troy had known his whole life, who had been part of this shared enterprise from the very beginning, was gone. But Junior's death also forced Troy to confront something far bigger than another loss in the Swamp People family. The show has survived cast changes, scandals, and tragedy. But what happens when the place that made all of it possible begins to disappear? The swamp itself is disappearing. Every story about what changed Swamp People eventually arrives at the thing that cannot be fixed by a new production company, or a new cast lineup, or a new format tweak. The thing that is changing fastest and most irrevocably is not the show. It is the world the show is set in. Louisiana is losing land, not gradually, measurably, visibly, year over year. Louisiana loses approximately a football field of coastal land every 100 minutes, primarily due to a combination of rising sea levels, the subsidence of wetland soil, saltwater intrusion through man-made canals, and the absence of the Mississippi River flooding that used to replenish the basin with sediment. The Atchafalaya Basin, the geography that Swamp People has documented for 15 years, sits in one of the most vulnerable regions of this crisis. The wetlands that alligators depend on for shelter, nesting, and raising their young are contracting. The cypress forests that define the visual landscape of every Swamp People season are under stress. Rising sea levels are likely to swallow up many of the wetlands that alligators thrive in. More extreme temperatures during the winter months can lead to rising mortality among younger alligators. The canals dug through the basin over a century of economic development allow salt water into freshwater wetlands, and once the vegetation dies, the land that it supports dissolves into the Gulf of Mexico. The irony embedded in all of this is considerable. The alligator is actually a conservation success story. The American alligator was brought back from near extinction in the 1950s through a combination of federal protection, regulated hunting, and the kind of community-based wildlife management that the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries has practiced for decades. The hunting shown on Swamp People is not threatening the alligator population. It is part of the management system that keeps the population balanced. The alligators are fine, but the swamp they live in is not fine. When season 15 opened with the Troy Landry crew adjusting their strategies because water levels had plummeted, it was a real environmental condition affecting the hunting in real ways. When hunters in recent seasons have talked about the swamp being different from how it was when they were young, they are describing something that is measurably true. The landscape is changing under their boats. This is the deepest change that swamp people cannot control and cannot script its way around. And yet, the show is still there. Season 17 premiered on the History Channel on January 7, 2026, with Troy Landry, Jacob Landry, Bruce Mitchell, Anna Folse, and the next generation of hunters continuing to fill the basin every September. The show has survived the deaths of original cast members, a mass firing that turned its own audience against it, legal troubles that removed beloved figures, a prostate cancer diagnosis for its most essential personality, and an environmental crisis that is slowly reshaping the world it documents. Which change to swamp people hit you hardest? And do you think the show can survive without Troy Landry? Or is he the whole thing? Share your thoughts in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.